Riptide. The first time I met Dr. Kai Nakamura, I was being lowered from a helicopter into 40-foot seas to pull him out of a sinking research vessel, and he was trying to save a cooler full of orca tissue samples instead of his own life. I couldn't see him at first through the spray and the chaos. Just a 26-foot boat listing hard to starboard, taking on water, getting battered by waves that shouldn't have existed according to the weather forecast. The Pacific had turned violent in under an hour, a freak storm that came out of nowhere and was now trying to kill everyone stupid enough to be on the water. My swim partner Jake was in my ear through the comm system. Survivor located on deck, not responding to hails. Vessel sinking fast. You're going in hot, Marcus. Copy that. I checked my gear one last time. Dry suit sealed. Rescue strap ready. Knife accessible. The helicopter hovered as low as the pilot dared. And then I was falling through the rotor wash into the coldest water I'd felt in 5 years of rescues. The ocean tried to kill me immediately. 40-degree water, 40-foot swells, wind gusting to 60 knots. I surfaced, oriented myself, and swam toward the research vessel. It was going down, no question, maybe 10 minutes before it slipped under completely. And on the deck, clinging to a cooler while waves washed over him, was a guy in a wetsuit who should have been in the water already, signaling for pickup. "Coast Guard rescue swimmer," I yelled over the wind. "I'm here to get you out. Release that equipment and come to me." He looked up, dark eyes behind saltwater-spotted glasses, shoulder-length black hair plastered to his face, absolutely soaked and shaking from cold. "I can't. This cooler has 5 years of orca research. If I lose it, we lose everything. If you don't let go, you lose your life." A wave hit the boat, tilted it another 15 degrees. The guy, he couldn't have been more than 25, nearly went overboard, but held on to that damn cooler like it was more important than breathing. I made a decision, swam to the boat, hauled myself onto the tilting deck, and physically grabbed him. "Let go, now." "You don't understand. The southern resident orcas are dying. This data could save them. I can't." "You're dying right now if we don't leave." The boat shuddered, taking on more water. Maybe 5 minutes left. I looked at the cooler, looked at him, and made the kind of stupid decision that gets rescue swimmers killed. "Can you swim with it?" "What?" "The cooler. Can you swim holding it?" "Yes, it's waterproof. It'll float." "Then we're taking it. But you do exactly what I say when I say it, or I'm cutting it loose and you're not getting a vote. Clear?" "Clear." His eyes were wide with shock and gratitude. I strapped him into my rescue harness, secured the cooler to his chest with extra webbing from my gear, and signaled the helicopter. "2 survivors, one with essential cargo requesting immediate extraction." Jake's voice. "Marcus, that boat's going down in 3 minutes. Get in the water now." We jumped. The ocean swallowed us, and I immediately regretted every decision that led to this moment. The cooler was dragging us down despite being buoyant. The waves were trying to separate us, and the guy, Dr. Orca Research, was panicking despite the wetsuit. "Stop fighting," I yelled. "Let me do the work. Just hold that cooler and breathe." He nodded, forced himself to relax. I started swimming us away from the sinking vessel, fighting current and waves in 40-degree water that was trying to give us both hypothermia. The helicopter stayed with us, Jake talking me through the approach. "Basket coming down, 30 seconds. I could see it. The rescue basket lowering on the hoist cable, spinning in the wind. This was going to be ugly. Getting 2 people and a cooler into a basket in these seas was the kind of thing we trained for, but hoped never to do for real. The basket hit the water 10 feet from us. I swam us over, got the guy positioned. "On my count, you're getting in that basket with your cooler. Once you're secured, they'll hoist you up. Don't stand up, don't panic, just hold on." "What about you?" "I'm right behind you. Now go." He climbed into the basket, clutching that cooler like it was his child. I signaled Jake, and the hoist started pulling him up, watching him rise into the helicopter while I stayed in the water, in 40-degree seas and 40-foot swells. I thought, this guy better be worth it. The basket came back down. I got in, gave the signal, and rose out of the Pacific into the relative safety of the helo. Jake pulled me aboard, and I collapsed on the deck, shaking from exertion and cold. The guy was sitting against the bulkhead, still holding his cooler, looking at me with something like awe. "You saved my research." "I saved your life. The research was a bonus." I was too tired to be polite. "What the hell were you doing out here in this weather?" The forecast said light chop. I needed samples from the orcas near Admiralty Inlet. This storm came out of nowhere. He was shaking now, hypothermia setting in. I'm Kai, Dr. Kai Nakamura, UW Marine Biology. Petty Officer Marcus Hayes, Coast Guard rescue swimmer. And Dr. Nakamura, next time there's a storm, leave the samples and save yourself. They're irreplaceable. So are you. He looked at me for a long moment and something shifted in his expression. But I didn't have time to process it because Jake was checking him for hypothermia, and the pilot was radioing ahead to Harborview Medical Center for emergency intake. We flew through the storm towards Seattle, and I watched Kai shiver and clutch his cooler and look at me like I'd given him something more valuable than his life back. But here's what I didn't know then. Kai Nakamura wasn't just dedicated. He was the kind of researcher who'd spent 7 years documenting the decline of the southern resident orca population because he believed data could save them, who'd grown up in Seattle watching J-Pod from the ferry and decided his life's purpose was keeping them alive, who saw the ocean as something worth dying for, and I was about to fall catastrophically in love with him. 3 days later, I got a call from the Coast Guard Station's Seattle admin office. Hayes, there's a Dr. Nakamura here to see you. Says he has something of yours? I had no idea what he was talking about. I headed down to the lobby and found Kai standing there in civilian clothes, jeans, UW hoodie, his black hair loose around his shoulders instead of tied back. He was holding a small waterproof bag. Marcus. He smiled when he saw me, and I noticed he had a really good smile. I wanted to return this. You lost it during the rescue. He handed me the bag. Inside was my dive watch, the one my dad had given me when I graduated rescue swimmer school. I'd thought it was gone forever, torn off my wrist by the waves. Where did you find this? It was tangled in the webbing you used to secure my cooler. I found it when I was unpacking my samples at the lab. I wanted to bring it back personally and to say thank you. He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. You saved my life and my research. I don't know how to, thank you feels insufficient. You already thanked me in the helicopter, remember? I was hypothermic and in shock. That doesn't count. He met my eyes. Marcus, can I buy you coffee or dinner? Or, I don't know what rescue swimmers like, but I owe you something more than just giving back your watch. I should have said no. Professional boundaries, avoiding complicated situations. All the things they taught us about keeping distance from survivors. But looking at Kai, earnest and awkward and still slightly in awe, I found myself saying, coffee. There's a place near Pike Place that doesn't completely destroy the beans. His smile got wider. I know it. I basically live there during research season. Tomorrow? I'm free after 1400. I'm off shift at 1300. Tomorrow works. We exchanged numbers. He left, and I stood there in the lobby of Coast Guard Station Seattle holding my dad's watch and wondering what the hell I was doing agreeing to coffee with a guy I'd pulled from the ocean 3 days ago. But I showed up the next day anyway. The coffee shop was exactly the kind of place I'd expect a marine biology PhD to frequent. Windows overlooking Elliott Bay, walls covered in Pacific Northwest art, the smell of espresso and salt air. Kai was already there, sitting by the window with 2 mugs and a nervous expression. I didn't know what you liked, so I got you an Americano. If that's wrong, It's perfect. I sat down across from him. How are you feeling? Any lasting effects from the hypothermia? I'm fine. Checked out completely. He wrapped his hands around his mug. The samples survived too. All 47 vials of orca tissue, preserved and catalogued. Because of you. Because you jumped back into a sinking boat to grab them. That was stupid. That was dedication. I took a drink of coffee, studied him across the table. Without the wetsuit and the terror, I could see he was younger than I thought. Mid-20s maybe, with delicate features and intelligent eyes and hands that looked like they spent more time in labs than in the field. Tell me something true. Like what? Like why you were willing to die for a cooler full of samples. Kai looked out at the water, and I watched his expression change, the awkwardness falling away, replaced by something fierce. The southern resident orcas are dying. There are only 73 left. When I was a kid, there were 90. I grew up watching J-Pod from the Bainbridge ferry, and I decided that if I could do anything with my life, it would be figuring out why they're disappearing and how to stop it. And the samples? Tissue biopsies, blubber composition, contaminant levels, stress hormones, 7 years of data documenting what's killing them, pollution, vessel noise, salmon decline, all of it. If I'd lost those samples, I'd have lost 7 years of work, the research that might actually save them. He looked back at me. So yes, I was willing to die for it. Because what's my life compared to an entire species? I sat back, processing that. The absolute conviction in his voice. The way he talked about orcas like they were family. That's intense, Kai. I know. Most people think I'm crazy. He smiled, but it was sad now. My advisor says I'm too emotionally attached to my research subjects. My family thinks I should get a real job, but I can't stop. Every time I see J-Pod, every time I collect data that might help, it matters. It has to matter. It does matter, I said. And you're not crazy. You're dedicated. There's a difference. You sound like you understand. I pulled 47 people from the water last year, saved 47 lives. Some of them were drunk idiots who fell off party boats. Some were fishermen whose boats sank in storms. Some were kayakers who didn't check the weather. And every single one of them mattered. Every single rescue was worth it. I paused. So yeah, I understand doing dangerous work, because you believe it matters more than your own safety. Kai's eyes were very dark, very focused. We're the same. Yeah, we are. We sat there in the coffee shop overlooking Elliott Bay, and I felt that click, recognition, understanding, the sense that I'd met someone who got it, who understood that some work isn't optional, that some callings are worth dying for. Are you seeing anyone? I asked before I could stop myself. No. You? No. I leaned forward. And I know this is weird because I literally pulled you from a sinking boat 3 days ago, but can I take you to dinner? Actual dinner, not just coffee? Yes. No hesitation. When? Tomorrow night? There's a Thai place in Capitol Hill, best cow soy in Seattle. I love that place. I'm vegetarian though, is that okay? More than okay. They have an entire vegetarian menu. I was grinning now. Couldn't help it. Pick you up at 7? I'll text you my address. He was grinning too. Marcus, thank you for this, for the rescue, for understanding why I couldn't leave those samples. Always. I reached across the table, took his hand. Now finish your coffee and tell me about these orcas. I want to understand what I almost died saving. Kai talked for 2 hours. About J-Pod and K-Pod and L-Pod, about the southern resident orcas' dependence on Chinook salmon, about vessel noise disrupting their echolocation, about contaminants in their blubber from decades of pollution. He talked with his hands, got excited about data points, showed me pictures on his phone of individual orcas he knew by name, and I fell a little bit in love with him right there in that coffee shop. Dinner the next night was even better. The Thai place in Capitol Hill, tucked into a side street, walls covered in photographs of Thailand. Kai showed up in dark jeans and a green button-down that made his eyes look even darker, his hair tied back in a neat bun. He looked different out of field gear, younger, softer, but still intense when he talked about his work. Tell me about rescue swimming, he said over spring rolls. How did you end up in the Coast Guard? Grew up in Tacoma. Poor neighborhood, not a lot of options after high school. Coast Guard was a way out, a way to do something that mattered. I was good at swimming, good at staying calm under pressure. Rescue swimmer training was hell, but I made it through. I paused. And then the first time I pulled someone from the water, a little girl who'd fallen off a dock, couldn't swim, was drowning while her family screamed. I knew this was it. This was what I was supposed to do. How many people have you saved? 47 last year. 112 total in 5 years. Kai's eyes widened. 112 lives. Marcus, that's incredible. It's the job. I took a drink of Thai iced tea. But yeah, it matters. Every single one matters. Do you ever think about quitting? About doing something safer? No. Do you ever think about studying something less endangered? Something that won't require you to risk your life collecting samples in storms? No, he smiled. So we're both idiots who've dedicated our lives to dangerous work that might kill us. Apparently. I reached across the table, took his hand, but at least we're idiots together. We stayed until closing, walked through Capitol Hill in the Seattle drizzle, past coffee shops and bookstores and murals. When we reached his apartment building, a converted warehouse near the UW campus, Kai turned to me. "I had a really good time tonight," he said. "Me too." I was very aware of how close we were standing, how the rain was making his hair curl around his face, how his eyes were catching the streetlight. "Kai, can I kiss you?" "I was hoping you'd ask." He leaned up. He was shorter than me by a few inches, and kissed me first, soft and tentative and perfect, his hands on my jacket, my hands finding his waist. When we broke apart, we were both smiling. "I've been wanting to do that since you pulled me out of the water," Kai admitted. "Even though you were hypothermic and in shock? Especially then? You saved my life and my research. That's extremely attractive in a rescue swimmer." I laughed, kissed him again. "Go inside before we both get hypothermia from this rain. Text me when you're safe." "I'm safe now. I'm with you." But he went inside anyway, and I drove back to my apartment in Ballard feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Happy. Settled. Like I'd found someone who understood exactly who I was. The next 3 months were a study in stolen moments between our impossible schedules. Early morning coffee when his research boat came in and my shift hadn't started. Late night texts when we were both working. Another 12-hour day studying orca calls. "Send help. Just finished a medevac rescue. See you tomorrow. You're my hero. Back at you, scientist." Perfect match for a rescue swimmer then. The weird thing was how natural it felt. Kai understood when I had to cancel dates because we got called out for emergencies. I understood when he had to leave town for days to follow orca pods up to the San Juan Islands. We both got that the work wasn't optional. It was who we were. But the Pacific Northwest doesn't care about relationships. In late April, the National Weather Service issued a severe weather warning that made every boater and Coast Guard crew in Washington nervous. Major spring storm, worse than the one that had sunk Kai's first research vessel. Small craft warnings, high seas advisory, the kind of weather that killed people who didn't respect the ocean. I texted Kai that morning, "Please tell me you're not going out in this." His response came immediately. "I'm not. Learned my lesson. Staying in the lab today." "Good. Love you. Love you too. Be safe out there." I went to work thinking we'd have a quiet day. Instead, we got 6 emergency calls before noon. Fishing boats in distress, kayakers who'd ignored the warnings, a sailboat taking on water near Alki Point. My team was running non-stop rescues, and by 1400 I was exhausted but still operational. Then dispatch called. "Air Station Seattle, we have a research vessel in distress near Point No Point. Vessel reports taking on water. One person aboard refusing to abandon ship. Requesting immediate assistance." My blood went cold. "Dispatch, what's the vessel's name?" The Salish Explorer." "UW research vessel." "Kai's boat." I was already moving, grabbing my gear. "Jake, that's Kai's vessel. I thought you said he wasn't going out today." "He said he wasn't." I was in my dry suit checking equipment with hands that wanted to shake. "Let's go, we need to get in the air now." The helicopter lifted off into the storm. 40-knot winds, rain coming down in sheets, the Puget Sound churning gray and violent below us. I was in my harness, ready to deploy, and my heart was pounding with fear I never felt on normal rescues. Because this wasn't a stranger. This was Kai, the guy I was in love with, the guy who'd promised he wouldn't go out in this weather. "Visual on the vessel," the pilot said. "She's listing hard, taking on water fast. I see one person on deck." I looked down and saw the Salish Explorer, bigger than Kai's first boat, but just as doomed. And on the deck, wearing a bright orange survival suit, was Kai. What the hell was he doing out here? "I'm going down." I didn't wait for confirmation. The hoist lowered me into the storm, and I hit the water 20 feet from the boat. Swam through waves that tried to drown me, reached the vessel, climbed aboard. Kai saw me and his face went white with guilt and fear. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing out here?" I was yelling over the wind, over the terror, over the betrayal of him lying to me. "You said you were staying in." J-Pod showed up unexpectedly. I needed samples. It was supposed to be a quick trip. The storm wasn't supposed to hit until... You lied to me. I didn't think. You never think. You just risk your life over and over for these damn orcas. A wave hit the boat, nearly knocked us both overboard. We're leaving. Now. My equipment. I don't care about your equipment. I care about you. I grabbed him, started strapping him into the harness. You're getting in that basket, we're going up, and then we're going to have a conversation about you risking your life when you promised me you'd stay safe. Marcus, I'm sorry. Save it. I signaled the helicopter. But as the basket came down, I saw it. A cargo net on deck filled with sample containers, field equipment, data loggers. 3 months of research that Kai hadn't backed up yet. Kai saw me looking. Please, if I lose that net, I lose 3 months of work. The orcas... I know. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to leave it all behind. But I looked at his face, desperate and guilty and still hoping, and I made the same stupid decision I'd made the first time. Can it clip to the basket? Yes, the net has attachment points. Then we're taking it. But Kai, this is the last time. You don't get to risk your life for research anymore. Not when I'm the one who has to pull you out. I promise, I swear, this is the last time. We secured the cargo net to the basket, both got in, and rose out of the storm together. The helicopter pulled us up through the rain and wind, and when we tumbled into the cabin, Jake looked at both of us and shook his head. You two are going to give me a heart attack. Kai was shivering, not hypothermic this time, just scared. I pulled him against me, held him while the helicopter flew us back to Seattle, and tried to process the fear that had consumed me when I thought I might lose him. We didn't talk until we were back at the station, debriefed, cleared by medical. Then I took Kai into a private room and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. You lied to me. I know, I'm sorry. He wouldn't meet my eyes. You promised you weren't going out and then you went anyway. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Hearing that distress call and realizing it was your boat? Marcus, I thought you were going to die, Kai. I thought I was going to pull you out of the water, and this time you wouldn't be breathing. This time the hypothermia would kill you. This time I'd lose you. My voice cracked. And I can't lose you. I can't. He grabbed me, pulled me into a kiss that tasted like salt water and fear and desperation. When he pulled back, there were tears on his face. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I didn't think about... I just saw J-Pod and thought I could make it back before the storm hit. I wasn't thinking about you having to rescue me again, about what that would do to you. I love you, I said. That means I need you to stay alive. I need you to not risk your life every time you see an orca. Because I can't keep pulling you out of the water, Kai. Eventually I'm going to fail. Eventually the ocean's going to win. I love you too, and I promise, really promise this time, I won't go out in dangerous weather. I'll check forecasts, I'll have backup plans, I'll be more careful. Good. I held him tighter. Because you're stuck with me now, and I'm not letting the Pacific take you. We stood there in that private room at Coast Guard Station Seattle, holding each other, and I realized we'd crossed a line. This wasn't just attraction or dating anymore. This was love. The kind that made you terrified every time the other person went to work. The kind that made rescue missions personal instead of professional. Come home with me tonight? I asked. I need to know you're safe. Yes, but Marcus, can we stop by the lab first? I need to process those samples before they degrade. I laughed despite everything. Of course you do. Let's go save your orcas, Dr. Nakamura. Epilogue. 8 months later. December in Seattle is cold and gray, but today the sun was out. One of those rare Pacific Northwest winter days that feels like a gift. Kai and I were on a research vessel in the Salish Sea, tracking J-Pod as they moved through Haro Strait. There, Kai pointed. J2, the matriarch. She's over 100 years old, Marcus. Can you imagine? I could. Watching the orcas move through the water, massive and graceful and somehow prehistoric, I understood why Kai had dedicated his life to them, why he'd risk everything to save them. We'd moved in together 3 months ago, an apartment in Ballard with windows overlooking the Sound. I'd learned to identify individual orcas by their dorsal fins. Kai had learned to stop taking unnecessary risks, mostly. We'd built something that survived impossible schedules and dangerous work and the specific terror of loving someone whose job put them in danger. Kai, I said, watching J2 breach in the distance. I have a question. About orcas? Because I have approximately 700 answers, not about orcas. I pulled out the small box I'd been carrying in my dry suit pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. About us. He turned, saw the box, and his eyes went wide. Marcus, will you marry me? Even though I'm a rescue swimmer who might die pulling idiots from the water? Even though you're a marine biologist who might die collecting samples in storms? Even though we're both terrible at this but somehow make it work? Yes. He was crying now, smiling through tears. Yes, absolutely yes, but Marcus, what? Can we get married on a boat? With J-Pod nearby? I laughed, pulled him into a kiss while the orcas swam around us and the sun caught the water just right. Only if I get to wear my dress uniform. Deal. 6 months later, we got married on a research vessel in the San Juan Islands. My Coast Guard team showed up in dress whites, Kai's research lab showed up with marine biology jokes, and J-Pod appeared right on schedule. Kai had timed the ceremony to their migration pattern. During the vows, J2 breached 50 yards from the boat. Everyone stopped to watch, and the officiant laughed. Should we wait for the orcas to finish? Please, Kai and I said simultaneously. We kissed with J-Pod swimming around us. 2 people who'd met during a disaster and built something that survived every storm after. I saved lives from the water. He saved a species from extinction. And together we'd learned that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fall in love with someone who understands exactly why you do the work. 2 years later, Kai's research led to new protections for these southern resident orcas, vessel speed restrictions, salmon habitat restoration, pollution controls. The population started to recover, and every time we saw J-Pod, every time Kai collected data that might save them, I was there on the boat with him, not as a rescue swimmer, as his husband, the person who understood why the ocean mattered more than safety, who loved him anyway. That's not a bad story. That's not bad at all. Coast Guard Rescue Log, 12/20/2028, Air Station Seattle, training exercise. All units, this is a drill scenario. Research vessel in distress, 1 person aboard. Rescue swimmer Hayes deploying. From the helicopter, Marcus looks down at the boat. Kai waves from the deck, this time safely, voluntarily during a Coast Guard training exercise he'd volunteered for to help train new swimmers. Marcus descends, lands on the deck, and Kai grins at him. Fancy meeting you here, Petty Officer Hayes. Dr. Nakamura. You seem to have a habit of needing rescue. Only from you. Kai kisses him quickly before the training continues. Love you. Love you too. Now let's show these recruits how it's done. The drill continues. The ocean keeps turning. Love keeps holding.